So listen closely, because this story is different. In 2016, Jack Grealish carved his name into Premier League history, but not in the way you'd expect. At just 20 years old, he finished a season with 16 appearances and 16 defeats. Not a single win, not even a draw. 16 games, 16 heartbreaks. The numbers were brutal, and the critics had their knives out. For perspective, the only player close to such misery was Sean Thornton, who lost 11 games in 11 appearances. But Thornton was a one-off. He barely touched the Premier League again. Grealish. He was destined to become the most expensive English footballer of all time. That's the paradox. Failure at the start, fortune at the peak. Because Jack Grealish wasn't just another academy prospect. He had been breathing Premier League football since the age of 16. This wasn't a fragile starlet who crumbles under pressure. If you thought a bad season, or a headline scandal, or even a career-threatening dip could break him, then you never really understood who Jack Grealish is. This is not your textbook modern player, the kind who checks his glucose after a Big Mac. No. Grealish is like a time traveler from football's rawer, wilder past. He's got more Maradona and more Gascoigne in his DNA than he'll ever have in common with today's clinical, robotic youngsters. He plays on instinct, with chaos in his boots and magic in his stride. And make no mistake, his roots run deep. Jack isn't just Aston Villa born, he's Aston Villa blood. His great-great-grandfather literally won the FA Cup with Villa in 1905. At 6 years old, he was already in their system. By 15, the academy director was calling him old school. Not the fastest, not the flashiest, but gifted. A kid who could glide past men by simply dropping a shoulder. The verdict? He can be as good as he wants to be. That was foreshadowing. He was so good that even the first-team manager couldn't resist, saying it was like watching Michael Laudrup. Imagine being a teenager and hearing your boss compare you to one of football's purest artists. That's how much faith they had in him. Rio Ferdinand even invited him to his restaurant just to meet the kid. Villa couldn't afford to let him slip away. By 16, he was already on the bench for a Premier League game. But his legend wasn't built in boardrooms. It was built in the mud of youth competitions. In the Next Gen series, the Youth Champions League before it had a name, Grealish stunned Europe. Against academies like Liverpool, Barcelona, Dortmund, Juventus, Inter, he was the difference. 1 minute into extra time, he scored against Sporting to send Villa into the final. Then, he won the decisive penalty to hand his club the trophy. He was unstoppable. The talent was so obvious, so overwhelming, that when the organizers wanted to name a player of the tournament, they gave it to someone else entirely, because Grealish was too far ahead. Even the top scorer admitted, he's miles better than the rest of us. But football is never a straight road. The manager who adored him was sacked, and Paul Lambert, never the most glamorous coach, shipped him off on loan to Notts County, a relegation struggler in England's third tier. Yet even in those shadows, Grealish couldn't hide. He lit up the league. By December, he was running through entire defenses, scoring goal-of-the-month screamers, and celebrating by diving into the stands to hug his dad, which the FA somehow thought was worthy of a yellow card. Bureaucracy versus passion. By the end of that season, Grealish had become Notts County's star. The press wrote about his almost supernatural ability to beat a man. Paul Lambert had no choice but to swallow his pride and bring him back. Villa knew they had to lock him down before the vultures swooped in. And beyond the club battle, came the international war. England wanted him badly, desperate to steal him back from Ireland, who had nurtured him since the age of 14. It wasn't just about football anymore. It was identity, loyalty, and legacy. And Grealish stood right in the middle of it all. Chelsea came knocking with serious intent, circling like predators who knew Jack's contract was running down. On his 19th birthday, Villa fans held their breath as Grealish cheekily tweeted that the club better get him a cake, a playful jab at City, who had famously burned bridges with Yaya Touré after forgetting his birthday. Villa's faithful weren't laughing. They feared the prodigy could slip through their fingers. But Jack renewed. And when that first real season arrived, he wasted no time in showing why. In the FA Cup quarterfinals against bitter rivals West Brom, he entered the pitch like a spark of chaos, creating an assist, then getting sent off for diving, all inside 16 minutes. Drama, controversy, brilliance, the full Grealish package. Yet that was enough to force his way into the starting 11 for the semi-final against Liverpool. And for Grealish, that match meant far more than just football. Years earlier, his father had been attending an FA Cup semi-final when he received the devastating news that Jack's younger brother had passed away. Fate has a cruel way of circling back, but this time, Grealish wrote a different ending. That day, he created both goals as Villa stunned Liverpool, reaching their first FA Cup final of the century. It wasn't just victory. It was redemption, it was family pride on the darkest of days. But with Jack, the highs always seemed followed by devastating lows. That same season, he was caught inhaling nitrous oxide, hippie crack, as the tabloids gleefully branded it. Villa's new manager Tim Sherwood brushed it aside after a stern talk, and for a while the storm passed. Grealish even shined for England's U20s, helping them win their first youth tournament since 1994. But weeks later, he was photographed again, champagne in hand, nitrous oxide balloons floating nearby, on the very night Villa were humiliated 4-0 by Everton. This time, punishment followed. Demoted back to the U21s, his golden boy status crumbled. And as the season dragged on, the record would become infamous. 16 Premier League appearances, 16 defeats. No wins. No draws. Just heartbreak. Aston Villa, a proud club, relegated for the first time in their history. The next year was no kinder. Headlines painted Grealish as the eternal party boy, caught at 8 a.m. in a hotel room surrounded by chaos. Police called in to shut it down. Soon after, he was suspended 3 matches for a reckless stomp on Connor Cody. Villa fans had dreamed their local hero would drag them back to the top. Instead, they found themselves stuck in the bottom half of the championship, their starlet drifting further away from the player he was supposed to be. And just when it seemed his story might spiral into ruin, fate struck harder than ever. In a pre-season friendly, Grealish lunged for a loose ball, collided with Tom cleverly, and collapsed. At first it looked routine. Even Jack didn't understand why the pain felt so wrong. Hours later, he was in a hospital bed, told he needed emergency surgery. His kidney had split in 2 places, bleeding internally for 5 hours. In his own words, "They told me I could have died." What was expected to be a week on the sidelines became 3 months away from the game, with nothing to do but think. Those long, quiet days forced a reckoning. For the first time, Jack Grealish began to grasp purpose beyond the noise, beyond the chaos. As he later admitted, it was those relegation years that changed him. By the time he returned, Villa were struggling, sitting 7th. But Grealish came back with a fire. In just 22 games, he hauled them to 4th place and into the promotion playoffs. In the semi-final, he delivered the decisive assist, carried off the pitch on the shoulders of supporters who once doubted him. Out of near death, out of ridicule, out of scandal, the resurrection of Jack Grealish had begun. It was the ultimate tale of resilience, a club on the brink of despair, and at its heart, a boyhood hero turned reluctant savior, Jack Grealish. At just 23, in his 7th season with Aston Villa, he had already spurned a tempting move to Tottenham, swearing only one vow, to restore Villa to their former glory. But destiny seemed determined to test him. A chaotic takeover, 2 wins in 13 matches, and Steve Bruce ousted after a cabbage flew at his head. It looked like Villa's dream had already crumbled. Yet, in the midst of the storm, Grealish ignited hope. 2 goals, 3 assists, 6 unbeaten matches, and then tragedy struck again. A shin injury sidelined him for 3 months, and Villa's fragile momentum collapsed. 2 wins in 13 games without him. But then, salvation came in the form of Dean Smith, a manager who saw what others overlooked. Against all reason, he handed Grealish the captain's armband. And in that moment, the young star transformed. "With the armband on, I felt unstoppable," Grealish later confessed. From 14th place with just 10 matches left, he became the spark that set Villa ablaze. 4 goals, 2 assists, but more than that, he led them on a miraculous 10-game winning streak straight into the playoffs. The moments were cinematic perfection. A thunderbolt of a goal against Derby, instantly labeled the goal of the season. Against fierce rivals Birmingham, punched in the back of the head by a pitch invader, yet still rising to score the match winner. In the semi-finals, a decisive assist, then finally, the climactic victory over Derby in the final. Villa had returned to the Premier League. Dean Smith could barely contain his awe. That boy has matured, more than anyone could have expected. But with glory came chaos. The next season, Grealish was both hero and hurricane. 9 goals, 8 assists, carrying Villa through relegation battles and into the League Cup final, only to fall to Manchester United. Then the world changed. The pandemic struck. Lockdown violations, reckless driving charges, and 12 matches without a goal or assist threatened to tarnish his legacy. Yet, in true Grealish fashion, he delivered. On the season's final day, 6 minutes from the end, he rifled in the goal that kept Villa alive, sending Watford down instead. He was named Villa's Player of the Season, broke the Premier League record for most fouls won, and even caught the attention of Prince William, who wrote to Gareth Southgate demanding his England call-up. That call-up unleashed a new level. Grealish began producing numbers that placed him among the world's elite, rivaled only by Kane and Son. And then came the night that would define him. Villa 7, Liverpool 2, their heaviest defeat in 57 years. Grealish orchestrated the mayhem, assisting the first, second, and fifth goals, before scoring the 6th and 7th himself. Teammate Emiliano Martinez called him the right-footed Messi. Villa were 3 points off Europe, destiny within reach, but fate struck again. A cruel shin injury cut his season short. Yet, the story did not end there. Even half-fit, he went to the Euros. In his first start, he assisted the winner against the Czech Republic. Against Germany in the last 16, he came off the bench with 21 minutes remaining, instantly engineering both goals that sent England through to the quarterfinals. Wembley roared for him, though Southgate controversially kept him sidelined for much of the final. England fell just short, but by then, Jack Grealish was no longer just Villa's captain. He had become a national icon, a masterful artist, a fearless warrior, and soon, the most expensive English footballer of all time. Despite all the chaos and doubt, Pep Guardiola finally made his statement, making Jack Grealish the 7th most expensive footballer in history and handing him the coveted number 10 shirt once worn by Aguero. At first, it seemed like a perfect fit. Grealish scored a few dazzling goals in his opening month at City, and fans dared to dream. But by December, the cracks began to show. A Tuesday night exit from a nightclub with Phil Foden saw both players dropped for the next match. Foden bounced back quickly, but Grealish? Minutes dwindled, confidence wavered, and he found himself questioning his entire journey at City. They paid £100 million for me. But what have I actually contributed? He admitted at the club's league title celebration. Even Guardiola and teammates defended him, insisting he was misunderstood. And the numbers told an unusual story. That season, Grealish ranked 5th in the Premier League for expected assists, trailing only Bruno, Alexander-Arnold, Salah, and Waz, but an astonishing 69th for actual assists, below even his own centre-back. Creating world-class chances that teammates fail to convert is frustrating enough, but doing it for the best team in Europe, watching everyone else score from others' chances while yours go to waste? That's a statistical anomaly almost impossible to endure. Yet, Grealish's breakthrough was inevitable. November arrived without a single assist, but after returning from the World Cup, he turned his luck around in spectacular fashion. On his first start back, City were in second place, trailing Arsenal. Grealish registered 2 assists against Leeds, securing a crucial victory. A week later, another assist helped beat Chelsea 1-0. Then, a goal in the Manchester Derby announced his arrival. He was no longer a bench player. He was a regular starter, and suddenly, Arsenal's title challenge began to crumble. He assisted the FA Cup winner to knock them out, then scored himself in the league to propel City to the top. The streak only intensified. 9 goal contributions in 9 consecutive starts, nearly matching the previous season's tally in just 2 months. Against Leipzig in the Champions League last 16, he assisted twice, prompting praise from R. Greaves. When he decides to switch on, he's almost impossible to play against. Liverpool would soon witness that firsthand. In a single game, he sprinted heroically across the pitch to stop a counter, only to appear moments later on the opposite side to assist the equalizer. Later, a 1-2 with Bruno Silva made it 4-1, leaving the fans in raptures as he exited to a standing ovation. By the UCL semi-finals against Real Madrid, Grealish had broken the English record for most chances created in a single Champions League campaign. And yet, amid the triumph, he still found time to record a video for a fan in intensive care before leaving the Bernabeu. Weeks later, lifting the FA Cup and chasing the Champions League, he admitted, "This is the stuff you dream of as a kid." But the glory came at a price. The celebration stretched 72 hours without sleep, rumors claiming he stumbled through the airport so badly staff offered him a wheelchair. Though he insisted he had never been fitter, the indulgence, combined with injuries, would soon take its toll. The next season began with a bad leg injury, a hematoma so severe, his doctor admitted it was the worst he'd ever seen. Combined with alcohol use and fitness lapses, more injuries followed, 41 days sidelined, then another stretch off the pitch. Even Guardiola admitted, the kind of injuries he was having could only happen if a player is not fit, truly not fit at all. By season's end, heartbreak reigned. Left out of the Euros, ignored for the FA Cup final and Club World Cup, Grealish endured a full year without a single goal, leaving Guardiola to reflect, do I want the Jack that won the treble? Yeah. But I've got to be honest with myself, it ain't happening. Rumors of a move to Everton swirled, and fans were left to wonder, does Jack Grealish have one final trick up his sleeve, or has the magic finally run out?